John, welcome. Can you tell us something about that night in the garden, what you saw and what you learned about Jesus?
I'm almost embarrassed to be here. Yes, I was in the garden with Jesus, but I certainly didn't understand what was going on, and I certainly was no help to him there.
Did you see him praying?
Yes, he went away to pray, and he asked us to pray with him. I could tell he was struggling, but after the meal, after the cups of wine we drank with the Passover meal, after the long walk in the garden in the dark, I just couldn't keep my eyes open, and I admit I fell asleep.
Didn't you understand the terror that Jesus was facing?
Not really, not then. It was not unusual for us to go off as a group and join Jesus in prayer. It happened often. Jesus was busy at prayer many times as we traveled with him. I just didn't know what was going on there in the garden.
Do you understand now?
Now, certainly. I wish I could go back to the garden and do it over. I wish I could join Jesus in his prayer, in his struggle. I know that it would be different now. Jesus was facing the most difficult crossroad in his life. He was staring at the reality of the suffering he would have to endure, facing the cross, and most terribly, facing it alone.
Was it really different from the other times that he had to choose between his own way and God's way? Was his choice to obey in spite of the pain so unusual?
Not really. We know that Jesus was often tempted to stay away from God's plan for him, God's plan for us. Satan harassed him like he did in the wilderness with a way out, a way to avoid the suffering. Just bow down to and worship me, Satan said, and I will give all this to you. He was offering a shortcut that avoided the cross, but Jesus sent him away, and he clung to the path that God had set for him.
What does Jesus' choice to obey in spite of the terror that faced him mean to you now?
It inspires and convicts me. It must do the same for you.
What do you mean?
Well, I'm certainly not unique. I faced a crossroads like Jesus's many times in my life. I mean, not with the weight of the world on my shoulders, but with my own heart in conflict over which way to go. I faced that crossroads every time I came to the place where I heard the voice in me say, look, you know what will happen if you choose to obey God's claim on your life. You will be hurt, you will be excluded, you will be scorned, and you will be persecuted. Every time I stood at the crossroad, I remembered Jesus in the garden and asked him to stay awake with me, watch with me, and pray for me.
Did that happen often?
In those years after Jesus ascended, all of us that followed him were faced with the choice to follow or deny him. If we denied him, we could escape the threats, the persecution, even the suffering or death. I asked God's help to remain faithful and encouraged others to do the same in my book, Revelation. I wrote, do not fear what you are about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison that you may be tested, and for 10 days you will have tribulation. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life.
But we aren't persecuted. We don't face that kind of crossroad.
You face the crossroad of obedience every time you confront a choice that asks, will you follow your own way, the way of the world, the way that others push you to, the way that you think will be easiest or most pleasant for you? Or will you follow the way Jesus would lead you, the way of obedience?
But those kind of choices happen every day.
And that is why you need the power and presence of God every day. That's what Jesus was doing there in the garden and on the cross. He was bringing forgiveness and new life to you there. By God's power and the sacrifice of Jesus, you begin each day new and forgiven, new and able to make the choice of obedience.
And how can we make those right choices?
Here's another thing I wrote in my gospel. Jesus said, abide in me and I in you. The same Jesus who struggled there in the garden, the one who went to the cross, the one who rose, is there in our hearts, with us at our crossroads and in our choices.
Thank you, John, for those words of encouragement.